So I am on Instagram and on Facebook. So if you see me looking this way or that way, you know why. We have quite a few new people in the Facebook group, so that's really awesome. Say hi. And yeah, so when you are watching live, just comment and say hi. It's always nice to see who's watching, but you can also, when you are watching as a replay, you can also comment that you just say #replay, and then you can comment anything that comes up as we're watching it. So these are interactive, they are informal. It's not me kind of lecturing or giving some formal talk. It's just a discussion on a particular topic. And I'd love to hear your input on it, your thoughts on it, your experiences with it. Or that, hey, Kim. So feel free to just share as we're going through this topic. And just to kick that off, I'd love to hear what your kind of money stories are. Like, what comes up for you when you think like money is ... or money means. What are the kind of stories that you had growing up, the kind of beliefs that your parents had about it, or the messaging that you got? Like, what do you believe about money? What are your stories about money? What does it mean to you? I'd love to hear from you guys. And just before I share mine, I just wanted to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm Sarah, health and career coach for clinicians. And this fits into the health and career of clinicians. In my experience, particularly female clinicians tend to struggle with this. But think about it, like if we genuinely believe that money is something bad that we shouldn't have, we aren't going to actually want to tell people about our services. We aren't going to want to encourage people to come and see us because we feel a bit icky or weird about charging. Or maybe we don't want to put up our prices because we're worried about losing patients. We can actually have all these secondary effects in relation to what we believe about money. And we'll also go into like, what are the long-term effects of that on our practices, on our careers, on our fulfillment, and all of these things can affect not only how fulfilled and happy we are in the career that we have, but then also other effects like physical effects from overworking or emotional effects from that mental load of what you believe about money and how much you are feeling guilty about charging, or you undercharge and then you feel resentful. There can be so many secondary effects of that. Okay, so my sort of money story, I mean, there are, other messages and stuff as well, but I think where we get the strongest message is usually in our family. And I think for me, money was always this thing that firstly just didn't really get spoken about. It was sort of this thing that just shouldn't matter. You shouldn't worry about money, you shouldn't think about money, you shouldn't want money, and very kind of not necessarily said in that way, but in some sense, if that's what you're going for, then there's this idea that you are selfish or greedy or just not a good person, right? And I remember feeling like I was either helping or I was charging money. And those two things didn't kind of blend in with each other. Almost like if I truly wanted to help, I wouldn't charge people for my services. And you can see where that kind of leads, right? Almost denying the reality that money is a thing and that I need that in order to live and to enjoy my life and to have all the things that I need. So I'm sort of ignoring that reality, and I'm just thinking I can just help and I can just work for free or work for a really low amount and should be fine because I should be fulfilled and happy just helping. So that was kind of my idea of money. And I think partly what ties into that is like you should only want enough that it covers your needs. And like the basics, right? And then anything beyond that is just selfish or greedy. So I'd love to hear yours, Amy. strong messaging that you had. And if you think about it, we're so conditioned into this. I think particularly women, we also don't have a long history of having our own money, of being in control of our own money, of earning our own money. So it is also kind of a recent thing for women to be in that world of money. But we do often have different connotations to a woman wanting to be wealthy or charging a certain amount versus a male. Obviously, that's a generalization, and I'd love to hear from the guys as well what your experience has been. But generally, I've found that in a male, it's kind of encouraged and it's seen as a good thing, whereas with females, it's not. And we're very conditioned to be helpers and to be generous and that kind of thing as well. So we have a lot of like I'm even thinking in like movies as well, right? The evil characters are usually like the rich characters. They're usually evil or greedy or bad, or and then what we also hear a lot is like when you want money or when you want wealth, that you are obsessed with money, or that all you think about is money, right? And just thinking about like actually when you don't have money, that's when you're thinking about it all the time. That is actually when you're obsessing about it, not when you have a lot. So just seeing these interesting like messages that we have. For some people, it's just taboo to talk about. You just don't talk about that. You don't talk about what you earn or that you want money or all of that. Or kind of like in my situation where it just, the message is that it doesn't matter and it shouldn't matter. So just going into like the more, I guess, long-term effects, and this is what happened to me as well. Part of these things I fell into as well. So, you know, not actually wanting to, to like market yourself or to sell your services because you're worried about what it means about you, worried about being selfish or greedy, or that it means something bad about you. So you can see the sort of long-term effects of that if we are not wanting to book people into our practices. We're not going to make the money that we need to be making to, you know, live, but also to keep our own practices open. And if you end up closing your practice because you're not making enough money to sustain that, is that really being of service? Is that really helping? Like, how much are you able to help if you don't even have a practice anymore because you were too scared to charge or felt that there was something bad about charging? So feeling resentful, like I said earlier, exhausted and burnt out from overworking, right? Sometimes we just charge such low fees that in order to actually make ends meet, we have to work way more than if we just increase our prices. So working multiple jobs to make up for that, being exhausted, burnt out, and then things like what I've also seen is like people have this sort of fear and this sort of people-pleasing way of looking at it. Like they think that if they had to increase their prices or if they had to charge a certain amount, that they would lose some of their patients, and they don't want that discomfort of someone judging them. So, you know, a character judgment from someone else that that person thinks you're selfish or greedy, or just worry about money, or don't actually want to help, or whatever it is. We're worried about other people making judgments of us, for example, our patients. Or maybe a colleague that you don't want to tell them how much you charge because you worry that they think that they're going to think something of you. So they can be like a people-pleasing, and then also a kind of judgment of our patients when they don't want to pay our fees. So a lot of the time we'll say something like, you know, they didn't want to invest in their health. They, you know, went on this holiday, or they spend money on this and that, but they just don't spend money on their health. And we can kind of get into this kind of judging place of our patients as well, which can affect our relationship with patients. So that people pleasing, doing things out of trying to keep them happy, even though it's not what you want or need, or having that judgmental nature towards your patient can affect the way that you actually connect with your patient. Okay, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, what have you seen? How have you not only had certain money beliefs and stories, but how have they affected the way that you actually practice? And maybe you didn't see it before that as this is about money, but now that you're kind of thinking about these secondary effects, you realize that it's coming from a particular belief about money. Okay, so let's think about the other side of this. Like if we actually, so if we think about what is a different way to think about it. So if we realize that most of what we believe about money in terms of like it being selfish or greedy or means something bad about us, or that we can't help if we're charging, that we just realize that it's not necessarily the truth. Like we don't have to just believe whatever our thoughts are about money, and we can realize, we can distance a little bit from that and realize that there are certain ways that we've been conditioned to think about money. Maybe it's our history, maybe it's our childhood, maybe it's our gender roles, whatever it is, we don't have to take on those stories for ourselves. We don't have to believe them, even if other people do. I was reading this thing this morning, it was by Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist. But anyway, he was talking about how guilt and shame are protective emotions, or they're meant to be helpful emotions. So they protect us from damaging our relationships or our reputation. And so we feel guilt when we've done something wrong, or we feel shame when we've done something wrong. And that discomfort of that emotion is meant to drive our behavior towards correcting that behavior, or to repairing whatever that effect on our relationship was, or whatever it is. So those are meant to be helpful emotions for those cases, but they are not helpful when they are related to something that you haven't done anything, when you haven't done anything wrong. So when you feel guilty for charging money, that isn't something that you've done wrong, right? Guilty for increasing your pricing, guilty for needing money to make ends meet, guilty for needing money to actually enjoy your life and to have things that you desire. So just realize that sometimes we have guilt and shame, but it's not reflective of something that is genuinely wrong or bad about this. It's just that that is what we believe about it. That is what we've been conditioned to think about that. So what could money mean if it's not those things, right? And I like to think about it as like, it just amplifies everything that you already are. So the type of person that you are, it's going to amplify that, because now you have more resources to act that out. So you're not going to suddenly become a selfish or greedy or bad person just because you suddenly have more money, right? You are just going to have everything that you naturally are amplified. So someone who is very generous, someone who is very kind-natured and compassionate is going to do that with their money. Someone who is selfish and greedy and mean is just going to, money is just going to amplify that. So just realize, and almost having this self-trust of money is not going to suddenly turn me into some person that I'm not, right? So it doesn't have to mean that for me. It can just amplify everything that I already want to do. And it can amplify the good work that you're doing in the world. It can amplify how much you are able to give to others. So it can amplify the good things as well. It can amplify freedom. So it doesn't have to mean anything bad. And it doesn't have to mean that you now have to have a completely different approach to something just because of that belief about money. You can recreate, you can redefine what money means to you and really start questioning all those stories. So I want to talk a bit about the idea of like selling ourselves and selling our services and all of that, because that is where we often get a little bit like, it feels icky, feels like weird. And I want to just do kind of like a thought experiment of, if you had a service that you believed in so strongly that you that you wanted to tell other people about, that you actually felt that it was a disservice if you didn't tell people about it. So I'm not talking about pretending or like, essentially convincing yourself that this is great and you're trying mantras and whatever. I'm saying, what would you genuinely have to offer that you would feel so good about, that you would feel like people are missing out, or this is like a no-brainer for people to invest in? Like, how can you approach it from that angle? And how can I create this incredible service for someone that they would really want to have, and that I would be so excited to tell them about, so excited to market myself or tell people about me, or whatever it is, right? So thinking it from that side, because you can almost think about it as, when I create something valuable in the world, that's what I get paid for. So how can I increase the value that I'm putting out into the world? How can I create something that is absolutely incredible that I would want to tell everyone about? Because if you think about, you can think about maybe a product or service that you recently just were so excited about, right? You are like, I just can't wait to tell someone about this, whether it's a book or a restaurant or whatever it is. And someone asks, do you know someone who, whatever, or they just talk about some problem that they have, and you immediately like, I have to tell you about this thing because it's so incredible. Like, imagine if that's how you felt about your own services, but then also using that as, again, like a little mental exercise of what is the difference? What thoughts come up when it's me offering the service, or it's me that I'm talking about? What is different about that? And that you can start to kind of look at, because often we have no problem selling people on other things that we love and that we believe in and that we think they need to have in their lives. But then when that same thing is ours, we find that much more difficult. And that same kind of idea of the patient doesn't have to just invest in you because they should invest in your health, right? We often don't invest in things that from a place of like obligation. That doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel like something that I would want to do, right? And investing in our health is so broad. You can invest in your health in so many different aspects. So just assuming that a patient should invest in you just because you are in healthcare, that doesn't make it very appealing to the person. And again, it brings in that like judgmental aspect to it. We all spend money on things that maybe aren't necessary, but that doesn't have to be a moral judgment, right? So how can you actually think about what would make my service something that people would want to invest in, not have to and feel obliged to? What would they actually want? What would make it so valuable that you would want to tell the world about it? So I'd love to hear that. If you feel like that about what you offer, your services, or if that's maybe an area that you feel like, okay, that's maybe where I need to do some work, to really believe in my own services and to offer something that I really feel is valuable. That is resonating, Shelley's. Awesome. Catch up later. Awesome. Okay, cool. So I think the last thing that I just wanted to mention about that is like some little tools that we can use to start just shifting our relationship with money. And the one thing is that you can use that steer map. So in the workshop, if you go to guides, under the refill workshop, the day one, we talked about the steer map. But it's just like a mental map where you can see how what you're thinking is affecting your emotions, is affecting your actions, is affecting the bigger kind of picture. So for example, imagine if you have the thought, let's say you're looking at your fees and you're trying to decide your fees. If you have the thought, no one wants to pay for this, or maybe like Megan saying, what I'm offering is no different to anyone else. Imagine the emotional state that's going to come out of that thought. It's more going to be doubt. It's going to be, a feeling of pessimism or, sort of giving up, insecure. And then think about what you will do from that place. What kind of fees you're going to set, what kind of relationship you're going to have with your patient, how motivated you're going to be to create this incredible service. All of that is going to result from that, the way of thinking, right? Whereas if, let's say, for example, in a situation, you are setting your fees and your thought is, I'm so excited to create this incredible service. And the emotional state and the actions and the bigger kind of result that it leads to is so different. So that is just like a little mental map of, and obviously that's a simplification of how our brains work, right? But it's just to see what effect our beliefs and our stories about this kind of thing have on the rest of our life and our career and our practices. So that's one tool that you can use, is just to see what effect that is actually having. And then another thing is, for example, in a community like this, just talking about money more, talking about charging, talking about what comes up when we talk about our fees or think about charging, like just get that sort of out in the open and talk about the feelings and the beliefs and just have a place where we can discuss those things so that it's not this hidden taboo subject. And especially in healthcare, as helpers, we need to be talking about money in a way that's healthy and that isn't perpetuating those same things about being selfish and greedy, and we should be just helping everyone without charging any money. We really need to create new stories around that. So in a space like this, we can do that. And then thinking about role models, right? So finding people who maybe they are in healthcare and they are, fellow women healthcare providers, or they just are people that you really respect, people that are kind of going against that belief you have or that story that you have about money. So, for example, someone who's very kind and compassionate, but is also wealthy, or someone that charges really high fees, but they are an incredible practitioner. Someone that is almost, just kind of challenging those stories for you, and being role models in that area and allowing you to see how someone can be both those things, even when your stories are that those things are in opposition. And thinking about that, so I'm kind of jumping back a little bit, but if you think about, because this is one of the things that I had, if I really want to help, I will give my services for free. And not only is, there's all those secondary effects, but there's also, you might have had this experience or with patients that come to you. Sometimes when we offer things for free, the other person doesn't value it as much. And the other person isn't as motivated to actually do things. So let's say, for example, if you are giving an exercise, hey Sean, if you're giving an exercise to a patient, their level of motivation to do that exercise when they are investing in your services is very different to if they are getting that service for free. So I've had it myself when I, download free stuff and then never look at it, or I will go and listen to a free talk and think it's amazing, but then never do anything with the information. Whereas when I'm investing in something, I'm much more likely to actually be motivated to do something. So you are actually increasing the chances that the patient will be actively involved in their care if they are investing in the services. So you are actually, in some sense, doing a disservice then if you are just saying like, oh, I'll just give it for free because then otherwise I will be selfish or I will be whatever. So just starting to kind of loosen our grip on these beliefs about, being a helper, and we need to not charge for our services or not charge very much, or we need to just, be surviving. just starting to change our beliefs about money. And I think, like, if you think about who in the world you would want to have the wealth, who you'd want to be thriving, it would be people like healthcare providers, right? People who have a natural desire to be helping and to be of service and to create healing in people and to like the type of person that becomes a healthcare provider. Why wouldn't you want that kind of person to be one of the people that holds wealth in this world versus people that, you know, are genuinely people that we wouldn't want wealth in the hands of. So yeah, a lot of different sort of angles, but it's all just to start examining our thoughts and beliefs and stories around money, particularly when we work in healthcare, and what secondary effects those can have. And then how we can start to slowly think a bit differently about money and charging and fees and all of that. So feel free to send me any more stories or things that you struggle with when it comes to this. And we will definitely continue this conversation because I think it's really important. All right, so this is part of what I work with healthcare providers on, as I said, because it affects things like our energy, things like being burnt out, overworking, being stressed about money is another stressor, right? So all of this is really important, even if you might feel like money is sort of an aside, and it's not really that important. We know how much it can affect every other area of our health and of our life. Awesome. Have a good Wednesday, everyone. Thanks, Sean. I'd love to hear your stories as well. Awesome. Have a good Wednesday, and I'll chat to you guys soon.